My prompt is Salvador Dali painting the skyline of New York City.
No way! That is so cool. What the heck? The like brush strokes, the color palette, that's fascinating. I wish I could I mean, he's dead, but go up to him and be like, look what I have.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Probably the only Dali that I could afford anyway.
What this means is that we can now create images without having to actually execute them with paint or cameras or pen tools or code. The input is just a simple line of text. And I'll get to how this technology works later in the video, but to understand how we got here, we have to rewind to January 2021. That's when a major AI company called OpenAI announced DALL-E, which they named after these guys. They said that it could create images from text captions for a wide range of concepts. And they've recently announced DALL-E 2, which promises more realistic results and seamless editing. But they haven't released either version to the public. So over the past year, a community of independent open source developers built text-to-image generators out of other pre-trained models that they did have access to. And you can play with those online for free. Some of those developers are now working for a company called Midjourney, which created a Discord community with bots that turn your text into images in less than a minute.
It has some work to do. I feel like it can be, it's not dancing and it could be better.
The craft of communicating with these deep learning models has been dubbed prompt engineering.
What I love about prompting, for me, it's kind of really, it has something like magic, where you have to know the right words for the spell.
You realize that you can refine the way you talk to the machine. It can become like kind of a dialogue.
You can say Octane render, Blender 3D.
Made with Unreal Engine.
Certain types of film lenses and cameras.
1950s, 1960s.
Dates are really good.
Lino cut or wood cut.
Coming up with funny pairings like Fabergé Egg McMuffins.
A monochromatic infographic poster about typography depicting Chinese characters.
Some of the most striking images can come from prompting the model to synthesize a long list of concepts.
It's kind of like it's having a very strange collaborator to bounce ideas off of and get unpredictable ideas back.
I love that!
My prompt was Chasing Seafoam Dreams, which is a lyric from the Ted Leo and the Pharmacist song Biomusicology. Can I use it as the album cover for my first album? Absolutely. All right.
For an image generator to be able to respond to so many different prompts, it needs a massive, diverse training data set, like hundreds of millions of images scraped from the internet along with their text descriptions. Those captions come from things like the alt text that website owners upload with their images for accessibility and for search engines. So that's how engineers get these giant data sets, but then what do the models actually do with them? We might assume that when we give them a text prompt, like a banana inside a snow globe from 1960, they search through the training data to find related images and then copy over some of those pixels. But that's not what's happening. The new generated image doesn't come from the training data. It comes from the latent space of the deep learning model. That'll make sense in a minute. First, let's look at how the model learns. If I gave you these images and told you to match them to these captions, you'd have no problem. But what about now? This is what images look like to a machine, just pixel values for red, green, and blue. You just have to make a guess, and that's what the computer does too, at first. But then you could go through thousands of rounds of this and never figure out how to get better at it, whereas a computer can eventually figure out a method that works. That's what deep learning does. In order to understand that this arrangement of pixels is a banana and this arrangement of pixels is a balloon, it looks for metrics that help separate these images in mathematical space. So how about color? If we measure the amount of yellow in the image, that would put the banana over here and the balloon over here in this one-dimensional space. But then what if we run into this? Now our yellowness metric isn't very good at separating bananas from balloons. We need a different variable. So let's add an axis for roundness. Now we've got a two-dimensional space with the round balloons up here and the banana down here. But if we look at more data, we may come across a banana that's pretty round and a balloon that isn't. So maybe there's some way to measure shininess. Balloons usually have a shiny spot. Now we have a three-dimensional space. And ideally, when we get a new image, we can measure those three variables and see whether it falls in the banana region or the balloon region of the space. But what if we want our model to recognize not just bananas and balloons, but all these other things? Yellowness, roundness, and shininess don't capture what's distinct about these objects. We need better variables, and we need a lot more of them. That's what deep learning algorithms do as they go through all the training data. They find variables that help improve their performance on the task, and in the process, they build out a mathematical space with way more than 3 dimensions. We are incapable of picturing multidimensional space, but Midjourney's model offered this, and I like it. So we'll say this represents the latent space of the model, and it has more than 500 dimensions. Those 500 axes represent variables that humans wouldn't even recognize or have names for, but the result is that the space has meaningful clusters. A region that captures the essence of banananess, a region that represents the textures and colors of photos from the 1960s, an area for snow and an area for globes and snow globes somewhere in between. Any point in this space can be thought of as the recipe for a possible image, and the text prompt is what navigates us to that location. But then there's one more step. Translating a point in that mathematical space into an actual image in pixel space involves a generative process called diffusion.
Basically, there's 2 main AI technologies. They're called clip and diffusion. So clip is the part that's matching images to text, and basically uses that match to train the computer to understand concepts in images. So it can generate new images of the same concepts. So when I asked it for an astronaut riding a horse, for example, it's not just making a mosaic of images it found online. It knows the idea of what an astronaut is. It knows what the concept of riding means. It knows what a horse is. And maybe most impressively, it knows what's an aesthetically pleasing image to humans. So then it can create a completely new visual version of this idea that hasn't existed before. Now, clip doesn't really have the ability to do the pretty high-resolution images all by itself. It's just more generating the gist of an image based on those concepts. So that is where diffusion comes in. So diffusion is super impressive. Basically, by teaching a computer to corrupt an image by adding Gaussian noise, it can then learn to uncorrupt or enhance an image by removing that noise.
And if you enter the prompt into a different model designed by different people and trained on different data, you'll get a different result because you're in a different latent space.
So in real life, or even in an AI-generated image, these scenes are pretty fun. A robot doing some everyday things. But what if you wanted to make something not as fun? Maybe something gruesome, or based on a real-life event, or a real-life public figure.
Say, Joe Biden eating a cupcake. OpenAI's DALL-E will immediately restrict searches like that, as the company prevents searches with names of public figures and various hateful or harmful words. Searches for other names do work. Like, this is what it thinks of Joanna Stern in space. When I put that Joe Biden prompt into Dream Studio, it generated this image. Stability AI's founder, Imad Mustaq, said he saw no reason to restrict the ability to generate images of public figures. Now say you try a photograph of a terrorist attack. DALL-E didn't generate any really believable images, but it did conduct the search. Dream Studio generated clearer images with guns and fire. If you look closely, you can see issues with the quality. But let's face it, people don't always look so closely on social media.
This all leads to the bigger tech question. How are we going to be able to tell the difference between the real or the fake or the AI-generated images on the internet?
OpenAI's policies encourage users to indicate that content is AI-generated. It also places this watermark in the bottom right of every image, but it can easily be cropped out. Stability AI doesn't require any crediting. Right now, another way to tell the real from the fake is quality. It depends on what you need. A realistic photo? Well, you're still probably going to need a photographer and props like we had today.
I don't need any help. Don't worry.
But quick, compelling graphics and illustrations for a presentation, website, or more? This would do the trick. And Microsoft is even incorporating DALL-E into its new Designer app and Bing Image Creator website. Bottom line, AI art tools are getting real good, real fast. But your AI-generated robots won't be able to explain the art behind their creation.
But here's the problem. What if you wanted a painting in the style of a living artist, one who earns money from their commissions?
As an artist, my work, what I do, is a part of me. It's a part of my identity. And these companies have allowed users to generate things that look like I've done it, that look like my peers have done it. And we're going to generate all kinds of things that you never agreed to, that could either be against your wishes, that could be against your beliefs.
Carla Ortiz is a concept artist, illustrator and fine artist who's designed for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, amongst others. And she's discovered AI-generated work in her style and that of her peers online.
I would even say that to me feels almost like some kind of parasitical copying, you know? Where it's like, oh, we're copying from another artist specifically to look like that artist. Oh, but it's slightly different, but it sure looks like that artist did it, huh? It's concerning.
This is a live issue, but there may be hope for artists whose specific styles have been replicated.
An artist wouldn't be able to claim an infringement for a style being copied because copyright doesn't protect a style. But when artificial intelligence has been used to make something in the style of someone else, then their original works would have been copied by that AI. So if an artist did have a problem, they could make a claim for their original works having been copied in the first place as part of data scraping and data mining.
But there is that other issue surrounding AI too. Given that you make your living from your art, are you worried that you might lose income because suddenly it's possible to generate stuff that looks like yours?
I'd be lying if I said no. I am worried. I have peers that are also very worried specifically, and this is a concern I share, for those that are entering the industry. And I've heard reports of illustrators whose projects were canceled, or, oh, hey, these interns that we were thinking of hiring, maybe not really. And there's whispers of that happening more and more within our industry.
And if you've ever taken a photo and sold it to a stock photography website, you better watch out too.
Most websites, when they write articles, they put photos on to go with the story. And the photos are usually not the actual story, they're sort of stock people in an office or something like this. Now, we're not quite there. People, hands, faces, they're difficult to do for AI. But if that gets better, you could imagine that you might just go off to an algorithm and say, I need people looking really angry because their printer doesn't work. And then there we go.
That's the real question behind this controversy. Take a look at this. On the left, those are images that were made by a designer at the media company Axios to pair with their articles. And on the right, that was made by prompting DALL-E. You still need someone to do the prompting, come up with the idea, make sure that it looks good, but the risk, and I don't know if this will happen, but it could, is that because these systems are so fast, that could be one person and not 20. And the chance of that job loss happening in an industry that's already hard is creating real backlash against this technology. A journalist used Midjourney in an Atlantic piece recently, and the response was strong. The uncomfortable question that I keep wondering is this any worse than what I've benefited from? My job is a video journalist. It would be impossible without the tools that mimic the work of typesetters and in-betweeners and film loaders and a bunch of jobs that I probably don't even know, and then put millions of them out of work in the previous form of their jobs. Be honest, is that true for you too? It certainly applies to the software tools used by digital designers in the jobs that we're now talking about. And then what about those who can't afford to hire someone, or artists who can't afford to use the current tools? Creativity is distributed worldwide. Access to an art degree is not. Access to the expensive software tools that digital artists now use is not. This is the profound power of technology. When used correctly, it can unlock abundance from scarcity. And in this case, that abundance is human creativity. That's really cool.
So right now we're at DALL-E 2. Where do you see DALL-E 10?
I'm more worried about 2.1 for the short term. I am very excited about moving beyond just images. For example, like audio and video. Things aren't quite at the point where the images now are like actually photorealistic, but it's a matter of like months before that's pretty much solved for images.
Hold on, months? We need to get ready. We've been talking about art. Photorealism puts this in a whole nother realm, for good and for bad. We're already dealing with deepfakes and misinformation and all of the things that happen when it's hard to tell what's a real and what's a fake image. Like, this is... But here's the thing. We don't need to blindly accept technology as all or nothing. These AI tools are a huge leap forward, pushing us creatively, but they'll need our help to refine how they get used. That's actually one of the reasons I make the show in the first place. I want to help people see these tools early and be a part of that conversation.
I definitely do not think at this point in time it will replace jobs, but I do think that as creative artists, photographers, musicians, videographers, like, we should play with this stuff now so we can help define how it can help us do our jobs better. And then it's up to us to shape what we need it to do for us rather than be shaped by AI.